Okay, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be discussing universal housing vouchers, okay? This is if Mr. Joe Biden were to take office for 2021, okay? Now, in my last video, we discussed the current administration's plans, and if Donald Trump does in fact keep office, we've already covered what his proposed plans would be, okay? So in this video, I want to cover the universal housing vouchers and what we should expect of that, okay? So the current budget for HUD is $47 billion, okay? Now, Joe Biden wants to inject $640 billion over 10 years, okay? So that breaks down to an additional $46 billion a year for housing. Now, if you do some quick math with that, I believe that would increase our budget that is currently at $47 billion and move us up to $93 billion a year, okay? Now, let's go on to what the universal housing voucher actually would be. It would simply be, the system wouldn't change. It would just simply allow anybody that's low income to be able to get a housing voucher, okay, that meets the requirements. And I'm not going to go in depth to what that needs to be, okay? So, you know, originally, I do have my concerns about there not being enough housing, but, you know, here's the deal. If you have, you know, $93 billion a year to give out vouchers, then what would likely happen is most housing authorities have what they call preferences, okay? So, you know, if you're filling out an application, there's about 8 or 9 things you can specifically say, you know, in your application that would be a preference, okay? These are little things they look for, whether you're homeless, you're a senior citizen or a veteran, okay? There are certain critical things that go into your application that would give you a preference, okay? The more of these preferences you have, the higher you go up the list, okay? So as it stands, most people don't have any preferences, okay? They're just merely low income, and thus they end up on a very long waiting list, okay? Now, those of you that have preferences, the more you have, the higher you rise on that particular list, okay? Now, when you injected, you know, an additional $47 billion on top of the 46, what would likely happen is everybody that has preferences, you know, would be able to move through the list even quicker than they did before, okay? Twice as fast, okay? You know, for a long time I told people that I recommended that they have at least 4 or 5 of these preferences in their application. That way they would be ranked much higher, okay? Now, what would ultimately happen is because of all the additional funding, that would mean that you would need less of these preferences and then more people would move very quickly. But let me tell you what's not going to change, okay? Those of you that are just simply low income, that are already on a long waiting list, now we'll see a waiting list that's twice as long and it's going to move twice as slow, okay? So the reality is that the only thing I believe that's going to change here is the people that do actually have these preferences are now going to be able to get through the system twice as quick, which is a huge advantage for me and my clients, at least the ones I consult with, because now I don't have to work through trying to you know, get as many preferences as possible to get those folks atop of waiting lists, okay? And then for the rest of you folks that are just low income, it's going to be a really long wait. Now, there's another scenario that could potentially play out. Joe Biden could decide that, hey, you know, we're going to inject an additional $47 billion, but half of that has to go to just people that are simply low income, okay? So that means that in that case, a lot of people that have already been on a waiting list and have no preferences, but have already been waiting for a long time, they will start to see vouchers, but the losers are going to be the newest people entering the system, okay? I've been telling you guys, there's a big wave of around 20 million people that are losing their homes and losing their apartments, and then that federal memorandum for December 31st expires, and so all these people will be entering the housing market, the Section 8 market, and so you want to be ahead of that wave. Trust me, you really do, because even with this kind of infusion of money and universal vouchers, you don't want to be at the tail end with no preferences, okay? If you don't know how to read these manuals and understand preferences and funding levels and the things that they're really looking for, then I would strongly advise you to get somebody that is a consultant like me that has a tremendous amount of experience with this, okay? So, and now the other and third and final variation that I could see happening with this situation is they could split the funding three ways. So a third of it will continue to push through people that already have preferences. A third could go to people that have already been on the list for quite a while, and a third could go to people that are new, okay? So there's a lot of different wild scenarios that could happen. I think that the one that would most likely would happen would be the first, because housing authorities are more interested in people with certain specific situations and specific preferences, okay? What they're really not interested in doing is housing people simply just because of their being low income, okay? They would like to get people that have specific needs, house first. And so with that kind of injection of money, that would clear the house of a lot of the cases that have just simply been waiting a long time. When it comes to these preferences, man, there are people that get housing vouchers quickly, okay? They just happen to say things the right way. They just happen by some miracle to fill out their application and have all the right stories in place and evidence, and they get it quickly. But most of you guys end up saying the wrong things and writing the wrong things in your application, and then you end up on a decades-long waiting list. Look, when we inject all this money and double the amount, essentially, that we're going to be putting into Section 8 housing vouchers, which will be the new universal ones, you can expect these waiting lists to, at the very least, to double, okay? So if you don't have any preferences, you should be prepared for a multi-generational wait, okay? It's going to be pretty serious. And the only reason I'm suggesting that is, we have one unusual factor that plays into all of this. It's called a pandemic, and the 20 million people that will likely lose their homes and apartments. And that's what's going to send this whole situation spiraling to hell. Because there's just simply never enough housing, okay? And of course, there's other hurdles, even after I get clients housing vouchers, you still, after all, have to go find the actual housing and have a landlord agree. And I hope that there's going to be legislation or something written into this that will allow people to have a better opportunity to get housing where they would like, okay? So, I hope this has been informative. When you look at this on Google and you look at it on YouTube, I think on Google alone, there's 3 articles, okay, in total about the universal housing vouchers, and there's 1 video on YouTube. So I am a little bit proud of myself in the fact that I will be one of the very few that was first to publish information on this.